Chapter 6. Mr. Hindley returned for the funeral, and to our astonishment and the neighbours' endless gossip, he brought a wife with him. He never shared who she was or where she came from. Likely, she had neither wealth nor status, or he wouldn't have hidden the marriage from his father. She wasn't the type to cause much disruption in the household on her own account. The moment she stepped over the threshold, every object seemed to enchant her. Every event around her brought her joy, except for the preparations for the funeral and the presence of the mourners. Her behavior during those moments made me think she was a bit unhinged. She dashed into her room and insisted I join her, even though I should have been getting the children ready. There she sat, shivering, clasping her hands, repeatedly asking, "Are they gone yet?" She then began to describe, with hysterical emotion, how seeing black affected her. She started, trembled, and eventually burst into tears. When I asked what was wrong, she said she didn't know. She just felt an overwhelming fear of dying. I thought she was as unlikely to die as I was. She was somewhat thin, but young, with a fresh complexion, and her eyes sparkled like diamonds. I did notice that climbing the stairs made her breathe rapidly, that any sudden noise made her quiver, and she sometimes had a troublesome cough. But I had no idea what these symptoms meant, and felt no urge to sympathize with her. "We generally don't warm to outsiders here, Mr. Lockwood, unless they warm to us first." Young Earnshaw had changed significantly during his 3 years away. He had become leaner, lost his colour, and his manner of speaking and dressing had transformed entirely. On the very day he returned, he informed Joseph and me that we were to relocate to the back kitchen and leave the main house to him. He had considered carpeting and papering a small spare room for a parlour, but his wife was so delighted with the white floor, the large glowing fireplace, the pewter dishes, the delf case, the dog kennel, and the ample space to move around in the usual sitting area, that he deemed it unnecessary for her comfort and abandoned the idea. She was delighted to find a sisterly bond among her new acquaintances. At first, she chatted with Catherine, showered her with kisses, ran around with her, and lavished her with gifts. But her affection quickly waned, and as her mood soured, Hindley became oppressive. Just a few words from her, hinting at her dislike for Heathcliff, were enough to rekindle all of Hindley's old animosity towards the boy. He banished Heathcliff from their company to the servants' quarters, cut him off from the curate's lessons, and insisted he toil outdoors instead, making him work as hard as any other farmhand. Initially, Heathcliff endured this fall from Grace fairly well, because Cathy shared what she learned with him and joined him in work and play in the fields. They both seemed destined to grow up as wild as savages. The young master was utterly indifferent to their behavior and activities, as long as they stayed out of his way. He wouldn't have even noticed their absence from church on Sundays if Joseph and the curate hadn't scolded him for his negligence, prompting him to order a whipping for Heathcliff and a missed meal for Catherine. Yet one of their greatest joys was escaping to the moors in the morning and staying there all day, making the subsequent punishment something to laugh at. The curate could assign Catherine as many chapters as he liked to memorize, and Joseph could thrash Heathcliff until his arm was sore. They forgot everything the moment they reunited, especially once they hatched some mischievous plan for revenge Many times, I wept silently, watching them grow more reckless by the day. Unable to utter a word for fear of losing the little influence I still held over these forsaken souls. One Sunday evening, they were banished from the sitting room for making noise or some minor mischief. When I went to call them for supper, they were nowhere to be found. We searched the house from top to bottom, the yard and the stables. They had vanished. Finally, in a fit of anger, Hindley ordered us to bolt the doors and swore that no one would let them in that night. The household had settled into sleep, but I was too restless to join them. I opened my window and leaned out, listening intently despite the rain, ready to let them in if they returned, regardless of the prohibition. After a while, I heard footsteps approaching and saw the faint glow of a lantern through the gate. I quickly wrapped a shawl around my head and hurried out to prevent them from waking Mr. Earnshaw with their knocking. It was Heathcliff, alone, and his solitary presence startled me. "Where's Miss Catherine?" I asked urgently. "No accident, I hope." "She's at Thrushcross Grange," he replied. "I would have stayed too, but they didn't have the decency to invite me." "You'll be in trouble," I warned. "You won't be satisfied until you're sent away for good. What possessed you to wander to Thrushcross Grange?" "Let me change out of these wet clothes, and I'll explain everything, Nellie," he said. I cautioned him to be quiet, so as not to wake the master. As he changed, and I waited to extinguish the candle, he continued. "Cathy and I slipped away from the wash-house to enjoy some freedom, and when we saw the lights of the Grange, we thought we'd see if the Lintons spent their Sunday evenings huddled in corners, shivering, while their parents sat eating, drinking, singing, laughing, and burning their eyes out by the fire. Do you think they do? Or being made to listen to sermons, quizzed by their servant, and tasked with memorizing a list of biblical names if they don't respond correctly? Probably not, I replied. They're likely well-behaved children and don't deserve the kind of treatment you get for your misbehavior. Don't preach, Nellie, he retorted. That's nonsense. We sprinted from the top of the heights all the way to the park without stoppings. Catherine lost the race because she was barefoot. You'll need to find her shoes in the bog tomorrow. We slipped through a gap in the hedge, felt our way up the path, and settled on a flower bed beneath the drawing-room window. The light was on inside. They hadn't drawn the shutters, and the curtains were only half closed. By standing on the ledge and holding onto the windowsill, we could both see in. It was beautiful, a magnificent room with a crimson carpet, chairs and tables draped in crimson, a pristine white ceiling edged with gold, and a cascade of glass droplets hanging in silver chains from the center, glistening with a glow of soft candles. Old Mr. and Mrs. Linton weren't there. Edgar and his sister had the place all to themselves. Shouldn't they have been happy? We would have thought ourselves in paradise. And now, can you guess what your well-behaved children were up to? Isabella, she must be 11, a year younger than Cathy, was at the far end of the room screaming as if witches were jabbing her with red-hot needles. Edgar stood by the fireplace, silently weeping, while on the table sat a small dog, shaking its paw and yelping. From their mutual accusations, we gathered they had nearly torn the poor creature in two between them. The fools! That was their idea of fun, fighting over who should hold a bundle of warm fur, only to both start crying when neither wanted it after all their struggling. We laughed outright at the spoiled little things. We truly despised them. When would you ever catch me wanting something Catherine desired? Or find us alone, seeking amusement in yelling, sobbing, and rolling on the floor, separated by the entire room? I wouldn't trade my life here for Edgar Linton's at Thrushcross Grange. Not even if I could throw Joseph from the highest rooftop and paint the house with Hindley's blooded— Hush, hush, I interrupted. But you still haven't told me, Heathcliff, how Catherine was left behind. I told you we laughed, he replied. The Lintons heard us, and, as if propelled by a single impulse, they darted to the door like arrows. Silence fell, followed by a chorus of cries. "Oh, Mamma! Mamma! Oh, Papa! Oh, Mamma! Come here! Oh, Papa! Oh!" They truly did wail in that manner. We added to the chaos with terrifying noises, heightening their fear, and then we dropped from the ledge, sensing the bars being drawn back, knowing it was time to escape. I held Cathy's hand, urging her to hurry, when suddenly she collapsed. "Run, Heathcliff, run," she whispered urgently. "They've let the bulldog loose, and he's got me." The beast had clamped onto her ankle, Nellie. I could hear its vile snorting. She didn't scream. No, she would have considered it beneath her, even if impaled on a raging bull's horns. But I did. I shouted curses fierce enough to obliterate any demon in Christendom. I grabbed a stone, wedged it between the dog's jaws, and with all my strength tried to force it down his throat. Eventually, a brutish servant arrived with a lantern, yelling, "Hold tight, Skulker, hold tight." His tone shifted, though, when he saw what Skulker had caught. The dog was pried off, its massive purple tongue hanging out, its drooling lips stained with blood. The man lifted Cathy. She was unwell, not from fear, I'm sure, but from the pain. He carried her inside, and I trailed behind, muttering curses and threats of revenge. "What have you got there, Robert?" called Linton from the doorway. "Skulker's caught a little girl, sir," Robert answered. "And there's a boy here," he added, grabbing me, "who looks like real trouble. I bet they was planning to sneak in through the window, unlock the doors for their gang once we were all asleep, and then have their way with us. Keep quiet, you filthy thief! You'll hang for this. Mr. Linton, sir, don't put down your gun." "No, no, Robert," said the old man. "Those scoundrels knew yesterday was my rent day. They thought they'd outsmart me. Come in. I'll give them a proper welcome. John, lock the chain. Jenny, give Skulker some water to challenge a magistrate in his own home, and on a Sunday, no less. Where will their audacity end? Oh, my dear Mary, look here. Don't be frightened. It's just a boy, though the villainy is written all over his face. Wouldn't it be a service to the country to hang him now, before he acts on what's so clearly in his nature?" He pulled me beneath the chandelier, and Mrs. Linton, with her spectacles perched on her nose, raised her hands in shock. The timid children edged closer, with Isabella murmuring, "What a frightful creature! Lock him in the cellar, Papa. He looks just like the fortune-teller's sons who stole my pet pheasant. Doesn't he, Edgar?" As they scrutinized me, Cathy regained her senses. She caught the last remark and laughed. Edgar Linton, after a curious gaze, finally recognized her. They see us at church, though we rarely encounter them elsewhere. "That's Miss Earnshaw," he whispered to his mother. And look, Skulker's bitten her. Her foot is bleeding." "Miss Earnshaw! Ridiculous!" exclaimed the lady. "Miss Earnshaw roaming the countryside with a gypsy? And yet, my dear, the child is in mourning. Surely she is. And she might be crippled for life." "What reckless negligence from her brother!" exclaimed Mr. Linton, turning from me to Catherine. "I've heard from Shielders," that was the curate, "that he allows her to grow up in complete ignorance. But who is this? Where did she find this companion? Oh, I see. He must be that peculiar addition my late neighbour picked up on his trip to Liverpool. A little Lascar, or perhaps an American, a Spanish castaway." "A wicked boy, no matter what," remarked the old lady, "and entirely unsuitable for a respectable home. Did you hear his language, Linton? I'm appalled that my children were exposed to it." I started cursing again. "Don't be upset, Nellie." And so Robert was instructed to remove me. I refused to leave without Cathy. He dragged me into the garden, shoved the lantern into my hand, assured me that Mr. Earnshaw would be informed of my behaviour, and, ordering me to leave immediately, secured the door once more. The curtains were still pulled up at one corner, and I resumed my position as a spy, because if Catherine wanted to return, I intended to smash their large glass panes into countless pieces unless they let her out. She sat quietly on the sofa. Mrs. Linton removed the grey cloak of the dairymaid we had borrowed for our outing, shaking her head and, I presume, admonishing her. She was a young lady, and they treated her differently than they did me. The maid brought in a basin of warm water and gently washed her feet. Mr. Linton prepared a glass of negus, while Isabella piled a plate of cakes onto her lap. Edgar stood off to the side, staring in awe. They then dried and combed her lovely hair, slipped on a pair of oversized slippers, and wheeled her over to the fire. I left her there, as cheerful as could be, sharing her treats with the little dog and Skulker, playfully pinching his nose as he ate. Her lively presence sparked a glimmer of life in the otherwise dull eyes of the Lintons, a faint echo of her own captivating charm. They were clearly entranced by her. She seemed so vastly superior to them, to everyone, don't you think, Nellie? "There will be more consequences from this than you expect," I replied, tucking him in and turning out the light. "You're beyond help, Heathcliff, and Mr. Hindley will be forced to take drastic measures, mark my words." Unfortunately, my prediction was more accurate than I wished. The ill-fated escapade enraged Earnshaw. Then, in an attempt to smooth things over, Mr. Linton visited us the next day and delivered a stern lecture to the young master about how he was running his household, prompting him to take a serious look at his situation. Heathcliff avoided a beating, but he was warned that speaking to Miss Catherine would lead to his immediate dismissal. Mrs. Earnshaw took it upon herself to manage her sister-in-law's behaviour upon her return, using cunning rather than force, as force would have been futile.